Hey, welcome back. So we are here for strategy 4 of TABE Reading M. Make sure you've got your book with you as we work through this strategy. Again, if you don't have a paper copy, you can go to the Files section here in the Canvas course, navigate down to the Reading M Pages folder, and you should see all of them there for you. And so we are again on strategy 4 in the TABE Reading M book. And this is very much a continuation of the last lesson. We've been hammering on this theme, no pun intended, of theme and main idea pretty much all the way through. The last thing we looked at was some literary text, and we were trying to analyze the theme through writing a summary, an objective summary of what happens in the text. We were exploring theme as kind of the main idea of a literary text. In strategy 4, though, we're back to nonfiction or informational text. We're stepping it up a little bit of a level in difficulty. The text that we're going to be reading throughout this strategy, and probably the next one too, are going to be, like scientific text, text in the subject of civics or social studies, which as you get ready to take your GED, those are certainly topics that you're going to need to know something about, and to be able to extract the main idea, the supporting details from more advanced texts than what we've worked with so far. So we're working with some of the same concepts, but we're stepping it up in a level of complexity with this lesson. All right, so let's get started. The main idea of an informational text is the central message or the point that the author is trying to make. So this is kind of a review of our definition of a main idea. Remember that it's something big picture. It's usually the biggest picture issue that the particular passage you're reading is dealing with. It is often implicit, meaning a reader must infer the main idea based on details within the text. All right, there was one sentence that kind of covered 3 or 4 different concepts that we've talked about. Implicit versus explicit information. Implicit is implied, it is not stated directly. And, this is a little bit different than what we've looked at so far, because most of the time in informational text, the main idea was explicit. It was stated directly. But there's no rule that informational texts have to come out and directly say what their main idea is, but they will have a main idea, and it's our job to figure out what it is, even if it's not expressed explicitly within the text. And inference that's what we're doing when we're looking at supporting details and trying to describe a main idea that is not stated explicitly. We have to make an inference. We draw a conclusion based on details or evidence within the text. Okay, a summary, on the other hand, is a brief description of the key elements in a text. It is explicit, meaning a reader simply retells the most important points in the text. Creating a summary can be a helpful tool for inferring a main idea. Read the paragraph below and review the chart describing a summary and main idea. Okay, we actually did this in the last strategy too with literary texts. We were trying to write a very short, objective, that means free of opinion, summary of the stories that we read. Picking up the main, most important details, certainly paraphrasing them and making them shorter, but writing that summary as a way to kind of point towards what was the theme of the literary text. And we're going to basically be doing the same thing in informational texts. We'll write a little bit of a summary, and we'll use that summary to point toward and to help us identify what the main idea is. All right, let's read the example passage. GPS stands for Global Positioning System. It is a tool created and operated by the U.S. Air Force to tell you where you are. It can also tell you where to go. The GPS consists of several satellites that circle the Earth and gather information. This information is relayed to machines on Earth where it is used for a variety of purposes. Many people rely on GPS as a tool to tell them how to get somewhere. GPS can be used on smartphones or programmed into vehicles. It allows emergency services to get to locations faster. Search and rescue teams rely on GPS to locate and assist people. For instance, if hikers are lost in the woods, GPS can help find their exact location. GPS safety features prevent accidents and increase safety for air travel. Finally, GPS is used to predict the weather. Satellites collect real-time data on weather patterns and send that information to forecasters. All right, we got a nice little technical scientific text there that describes and explains GPS, how it works, and what it does for us, its uses. So let's look through the chart and differentiate main idea from summary. Main idea in this case is going to need a little bit of inference. It's going to need some interpretation of implicit information, where summary is not. All right, so we'll work through the chart again, and this is definitely not the first time you have seen the information in this chart, but it is the first time that we've used all of this information on these more technical texts. Okay, so a main idea should focus on a central overarching message, like what does the author want to convey, big picture. Often it's implicit in the text that we're looking at, so you're going to have a lot of details that are explicit that you need to interpret to arrive at the implicit main idea. Developed using examples, facts, statistics, quotes, and other relevant information. You're also going to very soon be interpreting information in charts, graphs, other visual information like that. So not just quotes within a text, but also visuals, diagrams, technical information within that text also. And even though we're dealing with informational text, there may be some figurative language and imagery that's used to clarify complex ideas and processes. We haven't quite gotten to the point where we're talking about different types of figurative language, although we're going to arrive there really soon. But figurative language is when a writer uses words that have kind of a hidden meaning beyond just their explicit meaning. It could be what we call a simile or a metaphor, where something technical is being compared to something else that it's not really like, but we're being asked to sort of view the similarities. I don't know, maybe you're reading a scientific text and it's talking about scientific discoveries that have been made in history. And maybe it describes those as a journey that our scientific knowledge was on, this journey towards understanding and enlightenment. That would be an example of figurative language. The writer is trying to bring up something else that's unrelated, like a trip or a journey, to compare it to something that they want you to understand that's technical. So, in addition to using the explicit information to support its main idea, some of these texts will use figurative language too, in the way of literary and fictional text. All right? So let's read off the example of the main idea. The main idea of this passage is that GPS is an important technological tool. The passage explains that GPS is a series of satellites that collects and relays information about the planet. This information is used in many ways, including navigation, search and rescue, and travel safety. GPS is also used to help forecast weather. The many functions of GPS and accurate information that it provides can make it an important and useful tool. All right, so this writer, in describing the main idea, we have it kind of stated twice at the beginning and the end, good intro and conclusion. And then here in the middle, it's explaining how the information supports the main idea. What GPS does, it collects and relays information which is used in different ways. It tells us how they're used, all of which is getting us to the important point that GPS is an important technological tool that we're increasingly kind of reliant upon. So yeah, there was a lot of explanation of how GPS works, as our explicit information. And also, kind of like who uses it and for what purpose. All of that information points towards the implicit main idea that GPS is this important technological advancement that's necessary in our modern world for some of the things we do, like satellites, flight routes and things like that. Okay, but the summary, and just kind of take a look here for a second. The summary is pretty short. We're not responsible for recording or writing down every single idea or word or phrase within the original passage. It's kind of a skill that we can develop to be able to summarize something in as short a package as possible, but also pick up all the relevant and important details. So here in our list of what a summary should be, yes, short and to the point. Explicit, we're only talking about details that are directly stated in the passage. Uses information from the text to support the main idea. Kind of like this explanation of how GPS works and who uses it and for what, supports the main idea that it's an important tool. And it should follow a logical order, incorporating transitional words and elements. So if you're summarizing a passage, well, keep it in the same order that the passage itself was in. That only makes sense. All right, here's our example. GPS is a system of satellites that collects information about Earth. The satellites send this information back to Earth, where it's used in many ways. People use GPS to help navigate, conduct search and rescue operations, and travel safely. Weather forecasters use GPS to monitor weather patterns and forecast accurate information. So you can see some of the same information within this summary. It focused more kind of on the technical details. But what this was missing was the first and last sentence in the main idea analysis that kind of makes a value judgment on what's there. That, according to this evidence, GPS is an important critical tool in our modern society. So the difference is this one just kind of focuses on spitting back the details that are in the passage and shortening them and making them more efficient and less wordy, but certainly describing the details. Okay, I am going to read this test tip. It's pretty useful. So when answering questions on the tape, make sure to read all of the answer choices. Do not pick the first one that looks like it might be right before reading the rest. For example, an item that asks for the best summary might have more than one answer choice that includes key elements from the text. Read every answer to see which one provides the best summary with all the elements. All right, let's talk for a minute about answers on the tape and the GED. So on your multiple choice questions, you're often going to have two answers that are plausible, that make sense. You may have two answers that are not likely at all. Differentiate between those two plausible answers. Oftentimes you're being asked for the best answer, not the only answer. Unlike maybe mathematics, if an equation is presented to you, there's only one legitimate answer. There might be a lot of different ways to arrive at that answer, but there's one answer. It's not always like that in the world of language arts. One answer may have a group of more important details than another. All of the answers may say something that is true about the passage. They're not going to be out and out lies or fabrications, but they may not be the answer that the question is asking for. You could have a question that asks for the main idea, and there are answers that are not main ideas, but supporting details. So you need to be able to see the difference between the two. And one more thing before I leave the topic of test answers. We here at South Ark have seen enough testing and, have experienced it along with our students to kind of arrive at this rule. Trust your gut. Even if you're working in a subject where you're not super comfortable, you're not familiar with the content, you're unsure, but your gut, your intuition tells you that an answer is correct, trust it. I have seen so many people miss questions that they knew because they got in there and started doubting themselves and overthinking, what they're being asked. As a teacher, I do this all the time, kind of overthink the question and end up complicating the answer. And probably you see me do it on video quite often as well. So trust yourself. That may not mean that your gut is always going to be right. But when you kind of have a 50-50 shot, you've narrowed it down to a couple of answers, and the deciding factor should be your gut. Okay, you're about to pause this video and do a little bit of reading of this passage. It is in the world of civics. And, whenever we have passages on civics, and that means, like American government, politics, how our government is structured, how citizens should participate in democracy through voting and things like that. This is a topic that appears both on the TABE and on the GED. So certainly pay attention, not to just what we're doing with the reading skills, but also the content within these passages, because they're teaching you ideas that are going to be critical, certainly for the GED test when you take it a little bit later in your journey. Things about, our responsibilities as citizens and as voters. These are real common topics that come up on both of the tests. So, certainly pay attention to the information in these passages too. It's accurate, and it's going to help you when you get to the actual test as well. All right, so read through this, and let's go ahead and read through and do all of the activities. We don't have any more instructional content here, but we do have quite a bit of practice. So pause the video, go all the way through to the end of the lesson or strategy on page 23. And then when you're finished, you can don't restart the video, just press play. And we'll be going over the answers to all of these. All right, y'all, welcome back. So I'm going to start here with the example that comes from the passage that you read in your work, the first one. So the following is a summary of the above passage from The Fight for the Right to Vote. So remember, summary should have the important details, free of opinion, free of implicit value judgments, only explicit information from the passage itself. Okay? So our example is, in the U.S., people vote for their leaders. However, that right was denied to African Americans for many years after the Civil War. Southern states passed laws designed to keep African Americans from voting. One law charged a tax to vote. Another required voters to pass a literacy test. These laws were only applied to black voters. All right, so just a summary of the facts that were stated up here in the passage. But then when we get to the main idea, we're going to have something a little bit different. So for many years after the Civil War, African Americans were denied the right to vote. After a law was passed in 1870 giving African American men the right to vote, Southern states passed new tax laws to prevent them from voting. And so the main idea is this first sentence. And then, we weave a little bit of the information from the summary in there to explain and justify the answer. But, in our summary, it didn't come out and say flat out that African Americans were denied the right to vote during this long period of history. But certainly all of the details prove its case and lead us to this correct inference that, yes, after the Civil War, African Americans were denied the right to vote. And it's not an opinion, it's, it is a fact, but it was, sort of a main idea that wasn't stated outright and left to the reader to determine. All right, and, so these passages have continued to cover, the struggle for the right to vote, this being a continuation of what you started on the previous page. Okay, so number one asks us to write a 2 to 3 sentence summary of this passage. And you have a good example here. I'm going to read to you the summary that I wrote as well. I don't have it here on the screen. I have it in front of me, but listen to it, and I'll talk about kind of what it's all about and why it's a good summary. So, for much of America's history, minorities were prevented from voting through unfair laws. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 overturned many of these unfair laws. So I tried to just kind of stick to the facts that there were these unfair laws that were on the books. And in 1965, there was a new law that overturned those and meant to correct many of those things. All right, number 2. What key event is discussed in this passage? And it's the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Explicit information there. What's the main idea of this passage? And here's what I got for the main idea after writing a little bit of a summary and reading the whole thing. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 needed to be strengthened to guarantee fair treatment of non-English speakers. needed to be strengthened, fair treatment of non-English speakers. You know, I'm kind of focusing in here on paragraph 11 where they're talking about the language or literacy test. So that's where I'm getting that particular statement of main idea. And then lastly on this page, which sentence from the above passage best supports the main idea? And I picked first sentence of paragraph 12. It took a long time for all Americans to have equal voting rights. You could even pick up this next sentence as even more support for the main idea. All right, in the next one, this is the last page, I believe, yeah, for this lesson. And shifting gears here, this is kind of an informational text, but you know, in the world of self-help, it's you know, directed towards us as readers, giving us advice on how to live a more successful, happy life. Same skills though that we're working on. Number 5, what is the best summary of the text? So remember a few minutes ago when I talked about, you know, sometimes you're going to have legitimate answers, you know, more than one legitimate answer, and it's your job to determine what is the best answer. Okay, and so I picked B. Being happy is something you can choose. There are many ways to make yourself happy. Exercising, doing active things that you enjoy, being grateful, and having close friends all lead to happiness. Good summary about you know, kind of all, or that includes all of the, you know, practical pieces of advice on how to be helpful or how to be happy. It's free of a lot of opinion. It does summarize the passage as a whole, not just, you know, a smaller part of it. You know, some of these other summaries, like A and C, only cover a part of the passage. D is much too implicit. It's a writer kind of writing their opinion about what's here. So it's definitely not a summary. Summaries need to be just focused on the facts, Jack. Okay, number 6, our two-parter. Which of these is the main idea of the passage? And it's D, that happiness can be developed. And, you know, like all of the supporting details were showing us, explaining ways that happiness can be developed. So that answer is B. You know, one way to make yourself feel happier is to exercise. Certainly implied in that sentence, if there's one way, there's going to be many other ways. So, you know, all of these methods of developing happiness that are explained throughout the passage support this main idea that happiness can be developed. It's not just something that, you know, you're born with or is like a natural state of your consciousness or your being. That happiness is something that can be achieved and worked for, you know, a little bit at a time, you know, just kind of doing the little things. So useful message in that passage. That brings us to the end of this lesson on Strategy 4. You know, we're coming up on 25 good minutes here. You know, the next strategy is kind of a continuation of what I've talked about in this one. So make sure you're pretty solid on it before you move into Strategy 5, which, if I'm not mistaken, is the last lesson in this first unit of the reading text. So we're making good time, making good progress. You know, continue to send me questions. You know, you have access to my email, my phone number. You may email, text, you know, call if it's during the workday as well. You know, calling my personal cell phone is a much better way to get me than, you know, trying to call the school and then get connected. If I don't answer during the day, it just means I'm teaching class, and I'll get back to you if you leave a message. You know, but the point is that you're not alone in this journey. You might be getting tired of watching these videos and seeing me on camera. That's okay, but you know, we can have a more meaningful one-on-one interaction over Zoom or over the phone. You know, if I need to talk you through some of this content that I'm working with you on here in distance learning. So I'm here for you, even though I'm not in the room. You know, you have access whenever during the week that you need me, and I hope it's going well. And you know, I'm proud of all of you for sticking with it and making it this far. Have a great one.